Alright guys, welcome back, and in this tutorial I'm going to start talking to you about broadcast intents and broadcast receivers. Now, it's a little weird concept to understand at first, but essentially what a broadcast is when your app sends out a system-wide message, kind of like a radio broadcast. It doesn't really have any specific target, it's just sending out this really broad message. Now, the reason that this happens is because you can make other things called broadcast receivers, and whenever your broadcast receiver says, oh, look at that message is something I want, then you can make your app do whatever, I don't know, like whatever functionality you want. So what we're going to be doing in this example, I know it's kind of like hard just for me to like talk about it and explain it, but in this example, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making two entirely different Android projects. And these projects are going to essentially communicate with one another. So how cool is that? Before, of course, we could do things with different classes and stuff, but never before have we created two entirely different projects and have them be able to communicate with each other. So go ahead and start a brand new project. This is going to be our first one, and I'm going to name this one send broadcast. So one of the projects is going to act like that radio tower. It's going to be responsible for just sending out that system-wide broadcast. And their other project is going to be like, hey, I actually want to do something whenever I got that message, so that's what's going on. So click next. That looks good right there. Next. And we want to set this one as a blank activity. Sweet. Alright, so for the activity name, we can just leave it as main activity right now. It doesn't really matter. Alright, so here is our very first activity and our very first project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one button to this screen, and whenever we click it, it's going to send out that broadcast to the entire phone, to anything that's listening for it. And in another project, we're going to set up it's something called a broadcast receiver. It essentially is just going to listen for this specific broadcast, and then we'll just, I don't know, like print out some text on the screen or something. So the first thing I want to do is just add a button, and I'll change the text of this button to send broadcast. I also want to change the ID of this to send button. And the last thing I want to do is I want to add a real quick on click function, and this function we'll just call it send out broadcast, not broadcast, broadcast. Alright, so 3 attributes, and again, this is an alternate way to essentially add this right here. So again, whenever we click it, it's going to call this method send out broadcast. In this method, it isn't included. We're going to have to write this in just a second, but essentially, like I said, what it's going to do is it's going to send out a system-wide broadcast to your entire phone. Whatever's listening can perform some kind of action. So now let's hop over to our main activity, and let's just go ahead and import all the stuff we need to import. So android.content.intent, and I spelled Android wrong, so make sure you don't do that. And of course, import android.view.view. Alright, so the only thing that we need to do here is we need to build one method. And that method is send out broadcast, because that's the only thing that this activity and this project essentially is going to do. So public void send out broadcast view. So the first thing we need to do is we just need to make an intent. So intent I instead of equal to new intent. Now remember, before I said whenever you make an intent, generally what you do is you put some kind of class in here, and then it looks for that class. For example, remember we had that baking class in the last tutorial, and it just pops it up into a new screen. However, this is a special kind of intent because it doesn't have an explicit class or another screen that it's going to call. It's just going to kind of broadcast a weird message to anyone that's listening, so that's why we don't need to throw a class right in there. So after this, what we need to do is take that intent and call a method on it called set action. Now for right now, just copy this package name right here and throw it in here as a string. Now the reason that we need to set action on all of our broadcast intents is this. Say that you have a bunch of different programs on your phone and they're all sending out these broadcasts. Well, maybe we want to make a program later on, but it only wants to listen for broadcasts from this application. So again, if we have like 100 different, or not 100, that's unrealistic. If we have like 10 different apps and they're all sending out broadcasts, well, we don't want to listen for all of those. We only want to listen for this broadcast, for this intent. So the set action is essentially a keyword that, I don't know, it's like, this is the keyword for this broadcast. That's essentially what it does. So another thing that I want to do real quick is something called add flags, and intent flag include stopped packages. Now you don't really need to memorize this, just make sure you have it in there every time. It's just because they changed the Android operating system, and just to make sure that this intent broadcast is compatible with all versions of Android, you need to have this. So, that's kind of their fault. Nothing that we did. So the last thing, of course, in order to send that broadcast, you just send it out just like that. So now, as soon as we click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to call send out broadcast. And what send out broadcast does is it's just going to say, okay, I'm sending out this broadcast. Can anyone hear me? This broadcast is going out to the universe. I'm sending it out. So of course that's what it does. In the next tutorial, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up something called a receiver in a brand new project, and it's going to accept this or wait for this to happen, and then we'll just make something cool happen whenever it occurs.